So we begin with offering our respects to Prabhupada, to our Shiksha Gurus, to the previous Acharyas, Sadgoswamis, Haridas, Thakur, the Kali Yuga avatars, Sri Gaur and Nityananda, the presiding deities here, Shri Radhamadhava, Sitaram Lakshman Hanumanji, and all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So I'm just going to give a little recap, synopsis, why I'm giving this talk during Bhagavatam class. It's a facility that Mother Siddhamani is kind of giving me. And it began about 5 years ago at the beginning of my cancer healing journey. And it's natural to ask when we get some kind of, we have some upheaval in our life or some life-threatening illness, to question why, or to not like why me, but just how can I understand this? What's the lesson I'm meant to learn from this? So I did that. I was diagnosed in 2015, and I looked at as far as I could, because you can never exactly know why something happens. I mean, you can say it's karma, or it's this, or it's that, but it's complex. Gita teaches that too. Even great sages are bewildered about action and reaction. But we can get some hints just by asking the question. Questions are powerful. In our desire to know, to understand, to learn, to grow. So I tried to look at the physical, the emotional, mental, and the spiritual reasons I might have attracted the disease. The big C, cancer, we call it the big C because there's so much misunderstanding around it, so much shock for people. So looking at it from the point of view of the chakras, it was localized in my neck. Neck is the place of the fifth chakra. Fifth chakra deals with willpower, speaking your truth, so to speak, being in integrity with your values. So I've tried to imbibe that in this talk, in threadbare honesty, introspection. And that's kind of the history of how this talk came about. Probably given it about 15 times, not in as much detail as we're doing now. Mainly the introduction, kind of just touching on these points. So we so far, this is class number 2. We've done an introduction. We've done part 1. And in the last class, I talked a lot about spiritual practice. And that's really the fundamental principle of all the things that I teach and go over here. Everything is about supporting our spiritual journey, our growth as on the human and the spiritual level. To be better persons, better versions of ourselves, we could say, in our embodiment. To make our embodiment as favorable as possible for the practice of bhakti. That's our challenge, in my opinion. And, you know, I kind of played around with the order of this. I don't know if it's, certainly spiritual practice, that's on the top. That's the top of the list. Introspection, in my mind, is the second thing. But really, my wife's a therapist, and I work with her, and we've talked about that. You know, to be able to do introspections, you have to have a lot of maturity for that, to really look at yourself and your stuff. When I think back in my 20s, in my 5th decade now of trying to be a devotee, I'm 70 years old, so it would have been extremely, if not difficult, impossible really to do that kind of introspection because I didn't have much experience or perspective on who I was in this body. And really it was like in my early 30s that for the first time in my life I was really trying to understand who I was in the body. Sounds funny, you know, because usually that we're obsessed with that as a young person. Who am I? But I was blessed, like many of us were at that time, to answer that question. I'm a soul. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And that carried me through those first years of my spiritual journey. And until I understood at some point that I needed to deal with my conditioning in a very deep way. And that's kind of right about the time I started writing and journaling and trying to understand myself, physically speaking. Now in psychology, they talk about the self-actualized person, which is not a bad idea to be, like I said, the best version of ourselves. But my wife and I have dubbed it, you know, be your authentic self, you know, be yourself, but our authentic illusory self. Because ultimately, we're in a process to go beyond our conventional ego, our material conditioning, that I'm this and I'm that. And I've talked about the experiences I had, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, ego death, when I realized I had nothing to do with the body at all, no history, you know, how we define ourselves. And that carried me to search out the spiritual journey. So that's kind of the history of something of how I've developed a talk as a way to, as part of my healing, really. My healing, you know, it's like I had a pretty good morning, and then right before we left out a real bad coughing spiel, I'd say, oh, great. Not going to be able to go now because I've been coughing for like 10 minutes, but I got through it. And so it's a good morning, and I tried to offer everything to the Lord, of course. I recommend that. So I was in a little, a couple days ago, a little anxiety about giving the talk because we had our senior godbrother going to be here. And then I said, well, to come from a place of fear is not a good idea. So
Whatever you say, I know your history, and I know that you're a very saintly, mature devotee. So I'm happy to hear whatever you have to say. Don't erase that anxiety.
Yeah,
I'm not as mean as I look.
Thank you.
I'm a better version of myself.
Yes, well, we're all works in progress, hopefully. And that's another point, is that we're creatures of habit. So we want to develop good habits, good spiritual habits that support our journey of maturity on the human and the spiritual level. So anyway, so I just say, well, just do what you always do. Be yourself, be authentic, be real, be honest, be in integrity with your values, and then you can't go wrong. And we want to have Vaishnav humility, Trinadapi humility. And along with that is confidence in the Lord's grace, the Lord's mercy. That's stronger than any fallen condition that we may embody or think we embody or identify that as who we are. But we have to remember we're not our conditioning. We're conditioned souls. It means it's a covering. A soul is pure by nature, but we become contaminated. We become influenced by the material energy. And it's a maladaptive condition to be in. It's a condition of, Either we're nurtured by the material energy or the spiritual energy, but the material so-called nurturance is actually malnourishment. It's like going to a fancy restaurant. It's got a great reputation. Everyone seems like they're enjoying, and we're waiting for the meal, and they're giving us appetizers. But it never goes beyond that. They just keep bringing appetizers hour after hour, and we're like eating breadsticks, you know, like, when's the meal going to come? It's coming, it's coming. That's the material world. The material world is just eating appetizers, waiting for the main meal. It doesn't come. I mean, it's a meditation if you really understand that everything we're looking for is within ourselves, spiritually. Eternity, knowledge, love, happiness, fulfillment. Go within or go without. That's our challenge. And that's kind of what I understood as a young man at 33, that I needed to do that. I needed to really sort out a lot of stuff. So a lot of these points here are a result of writing and deep introspection and a lot of prayer. And so as I was thinking of a couple days ago, you know, a little anxiety, what am I going to say? I mean, I have a global belief that I've analyzed that things will always work out. So that's a pretty good one. But it's if I'm honest, I feel that. I've analyzed that. And for the most part, it's true. Even when you do dumb things, you make mistakes, you fall on your face, get a life-threatening illness. And in association with counseling and helping devotees, developing a perspective that everything is meant for my highest good. Now, easy to say, sounds good, but it's an attitude. It's a lens by which to view events, because the topic that I'm going to focus on is life metaphor. And we all have one. The stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. I'm this person, I'm fallen, I never remember people's names, I'm not good at anything. Or maybe we think, I have all these degrees, but I'm not very competent. Whatever, it's kind of a metaphor for how we define ourselves and how we see ourselves and how we see the world. Because we put our lens on the world and we see the world in that way accordingly. And, you know, is it good or is it bad? Well, it depends on your perspective. And when you really deeply, emotionally understand that, you may say, it's like with the disease, it's my karma, it's because of anarthas, because I can't chant. I'm limited now in so many ways. But, I mean, I chant in my mind. It's not quite the same, but is that the whole story? Or what do I want to emphasize? So the metaphor is kind of like what we want to emphasize about our life, who we are, what our potentiality is. So everything is meant for my highest good. It means that, okay, there may be so many reasons something may happen, but ultimately, Krishna's merciful, he's kind, he's loving, he's on my side. You know, we think, he's not the punishing God, you know, that maybe we grew up with in certain religions, when, you know, God casts you into the lake of fire forever. So, he never gives up on us. He's in our heart. He's trying to encourage us. Return, come to me, I'll help you. Don't worry. He says that twice in the Gita, don't worry. going to be okay. Surrender to me. It's going to be all good if you can engage in the surrendering process. So I'm not a person that remembers my dreams very much, but over the last year and a half, 2 years now, I guess, I've been kind of sleep deprived. I haven't been able to sleep very much. Like last night, I woke up every hour for 4 hours, and then I finally had to get up. My headaches are my alarm clock, like, So I have to get up. And so one of those mornings, so I've been remembering my dreams, and I've been sharing with Truth, Satya Das, my caregiver and healer extraordinaire. I've been having these kind of dreams where I'm trapped and restricted, and because what I'm doing is intense. It's very, restricted diet, new diet, ketogenic diet, all day protocols, one after the other. And they're not all very pleasant. I don't like them, but they're for my good. And in general, I'm on the mend. I feel better in some ways. I mean, in other ways, it's like, it's slow, but it's fast. When I think that I spent a year and a half in Vrindavan and basically just got worse, then the progress I've made in the last 5 weeks is pretty significant, actually. But when you're in the day-to-day grind, sometimes it's hard to appreciate. It's like, oh man, when am I going to feel better? When am I going to, but I've talked about before, I've had to slow down and be grateful for everything, give thanks for everything, pray for everything, just to swallow, just to be able to function, just to be able to do the next treatment, to endure, to go on. So that's a good thing, to really not take anything for granted, I mean, we do. It's kind of our conditioned MO until we're faced with restrictions where those facilities that we just accepted as a natural right are withdrawn, and everything is painful and an endeavor and difficult. I do like speaking, though. I get a lot of inspiration from being with all of you and having the opportunity to share who I am as a person. And that's, again, a lot of what class is. You share who you are, you share your successes, your failures, and really there's no failure if you learn from it. That's the main thing. What is the lesson here? What am I meant to, how am I meant to grow? How am I meant to improve? You have to pick yourself off the ground a few times, dust yourself off, and keep getting up. If you keep getting up, then you're doing okay. You may keep falling on your face. So I got my staff of knowledge, and Maharaj and I are in harmony like that. We got our staffs, our canes. We're raising cane, stirring it up. We're trying to give how we've been blessed. And we can all do that to different degrees. And that's, we're going to get a lot of reciprocation, a lot of blessings from doing that. From really trying to give back. And Jiva Goswami says something interesting in the Sandarbhas, because I've been reading the Madhurya Kadambini, good study about the stages of bhakti. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elaborates on the stages of bhakti given by Rupa Goswami. And there's so many, anarthas. Anartha means basically false value. It means we give importance to so many things that aren't important. So we're in the process of bhakti, in one sense, is to understand what's really important, what's really beneficial for me. It's what's really valuable for me. Because if I'm a soul, which I believe I am, I've had some realization, then what is most valuable is that which is going to help me wake up to who I am and my potentiality as a soul, which is so much greater than my potential just in a body. So anartha, nivritti, is a stage. It's not a practice exactly, it's a byproduct of doing sadhana, bhajana kriya, one of the stages, getting initiated. It's all a deepening of faith. We are our faith, Gita teaches, 17th chapter. Faith is the animating principle. So we want to understand these stages and where we're situated, what are the obstacles, but we don't want to obsess about it, become neurotic about, I have all these offenses, my God. But the real solution is artha pravritti. Artha means benefit. It's like karma, artha, those different 4 goals of the Vedas. So positive attainment, sadhana, spirituality. That's really the way to get beyond anarthas and offenses. Offenses there's so many different offenses we can commit that are the most serious kind of aparad. Serious kind of anarthas, rather. Aparad means aparad, against radha, against bhakti. So that's very serious. But still, we have hope for Krishna's mercy, the mercy of sadhus, the mercy of our gurus, to deliver us from that. And by our sincerity, our prayers, and sincerity is invincible. We'll eventually be led on the right path. So that should give us hope and encouragement, whatever our position may be. And when we go through the zigzag process of bhakti, ups and downs on the journey, so anarthas, offenses, but the mercy of the Lord, kindness, love, compassion of the Lord and his devotees. So Jiva Goswami kind of confirms that. He says that we can become aided in our attempt to become free from anarthas by always remembering we're a servant. Das, anudas, anudas. We're not the enjoyer. We enjoy secondarily as a byproduct of doing what we're designed for, which is to serve the whole, to serve the center. We're part of the center. And life does not revolve around us. We're meant to revolve around life in terms of it being a manifestation of Krishna. And like in the Bahunam Jamanam on verse, I think it's 7:19, Prabhupada says, and we realize that Krishna's mercy is everything. So it's like, wow, that's a meditation. This kind of like goes with everything's for my highest good. So it's a realization, of course, but it's very powerful when we really are trying to understand that. When we're focused, I've talked about that a lot, the power of focus. What do you want to give energy to? And when you're facing death, you realize that's pretty important, because whatever you think of at the time of death, that's your next situation, and that you die according to how you live. So we're trying to live the good life of a sadhaka, a spiritual practitioner, and be doing what's favorable, and really, really caring about it. And, speaking for me, it's like I'm excited about speaking to you. And for someone like me, who's been very laid back and not very excited about anything for my whole life, when I say I'm excited about something, that's big news. So, sorry. That was not a word in my vocabulary, to be quite honest. I'm excited. Like, we'll be, you know. That's kind of been that's how I got through life as a young man, with drawing. So, anyway, a couple nights ago, as I was pondering, you know, sharing with you, I had this dream. And there was a kingdom, and it was protected by a great samurai warrior. I don't know if he was really a samurai, but that's kind of how I interpret. He was you know, that's what he was. He was Kshatriya, so samurai warrior, saintly king. And because of him, they were always victorious with other, you know, other belligerent states. And he was healthy also. In the first principle here, I said, importance of spiritual growth with a supportive body and mind in balance. And take care of the whole thing here, body, mind, and soul. So he did train up people, warriors, but they weren't, it was like Bhishma Dev, you know, Bhishma was very special personality in the Kuru dynasty. No one was quite like him. And ordinarily, even the Pandavas couldn't have defeated him. But because Krishna desired it, Krishna was on Arjuna's chariot, they were victorious, even over Bhishma. So this samurai warrior, he realized that his days were numbered. And he thought, I need to have someone I can impart this responsibility to protect the kingdom. I mean, these other warriors are doing a good job, but he wasn't quite satisfied with their level of realization. So he was trying to train people up, and there was one servant that he had who was kind of a Brahminical nature. He was, I mean, he learned the martial arts as well, but he wasn't really a fighter. But he was very sincere, and he served him very well. And so when the samurai was getting ready to leave his body, the samurai blessed this person to be the carrier of the protection of the kingdom. And so I woke up thinking about that. So there's a lot of different ways this can be a metaphor for myself and for all of us, perhaps. That the samurai, in one sense, it's a life force, like in the story of King Puranjana, the allegory. See, allegories are bona fide metaphors. There is some subtle differences, but anyway. A metaphor, a way to represent our life to ourselves. So, unpacking that, we have to protect our life force. To be healthy as we can, spiritually, emotionally, physically, to give back to others. And it's something I got from the Christians that I really like. Keeping the flame of, they say keepers of the flame. So we want to be keepers of the flame of bhakti. I mean, I have another metaphor, like the sword of knowledge. I can hear it coming out of the sheath. Holding it up to stand for truth and integrity and values and spirituality. I'm not a fighter, but I've had to learn to fight against my disease. And I think that's partially why I'm in the healing process now. Because I've been trying to coexist with it, like, it would be nice if you moved on, But it wasn't cutting it because we got it good here, We ain't going anywhere. So I had to say, all right, Christian, we're going to have to increase the intensity here. I mean, I still say, Christian, if you would bless these cells, these cancerous cells, to have some realization that they're a soul having this experience, they'd want to move on. And I say, you'll make spiritual progress, But But I don't know if they were able to listen very well. But it's a meditation, and I say, okay, no more Mr. Nice Guy, We're getting the Pandavas out, and they're getting in there, and they're like shooting their ostras at you, and you don't really have a chance, You're like, because we're tackling disease from the inside out and the outside in, complete annihilation of the disease. I mean, it's still, of course, in Krishna's hands. I'm not in any illusion about that. I think every day could be my last day. Sometimes you think, oh, is it worth it? It's like, but I get through it, and I would like to live longer to be able to do more of this, to be more of a teacher and a share of what I've learned and what's important to me. So the idea, again, that we all have a story, a metaphor for our life, and through the power of prayer and introspection, we can uncover that and understand what kind of limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves, which can prevent us from being all we can be, so to speak, as devotees and human beings. So at a certain point, as a devotee, growing up, I didn't think, oh, I'm this poor child of an abusive alcoholic family. I didn't know that. So I gradually learned that. So then it was like my sad story. Oh, I'm never going to amount to anything because I came from this family and I've got all these deficits. So at a certain point, I realized that I could change my interpretation of my story from a disempowering, negative narrative to an empowering, merciful opportunity of growth. And as I come to see it now, and I've shared this before, but repetition is the mother of learning. So bear with me as I repeat myself many times. But I need to hear it. I don't know about you, I need to hear it. And that's one nice thing about speaking, you get to hear it yourself, and you get to think, am I in integrity with what I'm saying? So, to the extent that I am, then my words have power to touch the audience, in my estimation. So, changing the interpretation of our story to one of merciful kindness and assistance. And that's one of the gifts for me of dealing with possible leaving my body sooner than later. We all have to do it. And I had that good fortune. I got interviewed by the wisdom of the sages, devotees. And they said, we see ourselves in you. I said, well, that's good, actually. If I can do that for you, service. If you can be a little sober to realize that, we all have that waiting for us. You don't have to, go through exactly what I'm going through, but some kind of major test. If you're not tested, you're not going to go very far spiritually, even materially. So we generally don't pray for that. Oh, give me a really hard test, Lord. Not really. I mean, maybe somebody here does, but I never did. But I did really pray to make spiritual progress. And that's why the subtitle here is Cancer is Divinity's Embrace. That's my metaphor for this disease. Because it's been so good for me. I got to stay in Vrindavan for 1.5 years. I probably would have ever gone back, So that was a blessing, even though in some ways I felt like I didn't really enter the real Vrindavan. But I got, as I shared before, I got a lot of spiritual understanding and taste and excitement about Krishna consciousness. And that is a gift. And like I said, excited to speak, excited to read the Shastra. They're like, wow, you know, the wow factor I talk about. So we all want to have that. And we want to engage in really looking at ourselves. And whatever our age is, it may be harder perhaps when we're older. I mean, I really started doing that in earnest in my 30s, when I realized I had a lot of hatred, anger, resentment towards my parents. I was like kind of shocked, actually. Although, you know, like a lot of devotees, I thought I could just kind of flush my past. I was going to like transcend. I didn't have to worry about all that stuff. I mean, you can do it for a while, but in my estimation and study, it would appear that part of how we become devotees is the material miseries of life, the difficulties we go through, that there must be something else besides this. And that combines with our previous lives, bhakti sukriti, some connection with it, of course, and the mercy of a pure devotee, pure soul, all combines together. But even though that's true, it seems that we don't get off the hook of having to deal with our life issues. Now, what is a life issue? I say that to devotees sometimes, and they not always understanding what I'm saying. It means, basically means anarthas, repeated patterns, relationship problems, situational problems that we have that keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And many people say in the world that lessons keep repeating until learned. So if something keeps happening, it's not because you're so bad, you're so fallen. It's because you need to learn something here. And that's why it keeps coming into your space. But you're not hearing it. You're not questioning it. Why is this happening? What can I learn from this? What is a lesson here? So when we have that kind of attitude, we're going to get answers to those questions because we're asking in earnest. We really want to try to understand, we want to try to improve our life and understand the deeper meaning of what's going on. So life lessons are important, and that's, I saw those qualities, because I repressed everything for most of my life. But I'm trying to, most of my work, as I've said before, is coming to be emotionally present so that I can learn my lessons, so that I can experience the lessons and also the good. Because you make the walls to keep the pain out, but you keep the good out too. You keep the hate and the resentment and the anger, because you don't like it, you don't want to look at it, you don't want to feel that to anybody. But it's energy, stuck energy, that needs to be dealt with. I was a therapist. I was in counseling for like 20 years and reading self-help books and like understanding my conditioning and how I needed to rise above my past and not just be in reaction. If more devotees did that work, our temples would be a lot better places, a lot easier to manage. If people were owning their issues and not being in reaction to their past. So it's an important topic. I mean, just like when things have changed, but when my wife, she actually was in graduate school, dropped out, became a devotee, lived in a temple for 12 years, did book distribution in Potomac, and then went back to school, finished her master's, worked as a therapist in a mental health clinic for 12 years, and was in private practice with devotees. And she could clone herself like 50 times. And there's a big need for helping devotees deal with life issues and stuff and being in reaction. And we could arguably say when people heard that she was going back to school to get her degree in counseling, say, well, get her degree in counseling. I said, well, We just need to chant Hare Krishna. We don't need any of this other stuff. And yeah, but pure chanting. Those little asterisks there, you know? Pure chanting, pure association. That's the prescription for getting free from anartha nivritti, the anarthas. But it's not so easy to do. To chant purely without offense, to chant with your heart and soul, not distracted, not thinking about other things. Your wow factor is all invested in the Lord. That kind of chanting. So hopefully we don't become discouraged hearing that, but it's a very high ideal. But it's possible, like the Gita says, constant endeavor and practice in prayer. So that's the thing, we have to make it, we have to understand that it's difficult, but it's possible. And we have to believe, we have to be possibility thinkers about what's actually possible. And there's, by the mercy of Sri Guru, Gaura Nityananda, all things are possible. We don't want to limit the mercy of the Lord, or think that we're so bad and fallen that that mercy just isn't going to cut it with me. I'm so deranged or limited in some way. So we want to be confident in the mercy of the Lord. Boy, I was going to read something from the ISKCON that I forgot, but I guess it's too late now. But I like to read a little something as a kind of invocation. It's very nice ISKCON. It's a summary of the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12. Prabhupada calls it the process of knowledge. And it talks about becoming a gentleman or lady and developing all these good qualities. And that's kind of how I see this list, is developing the good qualities of a devotee, of a human being, because that speaks louder than our words and our understanding of the philosophy. It's the person we are, it's our character, how we deal with other people and devotees. So we can just try to understand the importance of our focus, what we give energy to, and this idea of a life metaphor, or the story that we tell ourselves. It's very powerful, actually. I've seen it practically in my own life. And there's a quote by Shakespeare, not absolutely true. It says, life is not good or bad, but the meaning we give it. So, there is obviously good and bad karma and everything, but at least in our personal consciousness, we empower negativity or positivity by our basic global beliefs, or how we define ourselves and how we look at the world. There's that quote by Prabhupada, you don't see people, what is it? You don't see people as they are, but as you are, something like that. There's a similar quote in the world, I kind of get them mixed up. But
Maybe also how they saw Krishna and Balaram in the arena with.
Oh, right, yes.
So we impose our.
Yeah, according to our relationship. That's why acharyas may differ on different points, because they have different relationships with Krishna. So that's, I always think that people are complex. Prabhupada is complex. Any one of us. And there may be some utility in that, but we have to see the limitations of that. When we see a particular devotee and we tend to put them in a box or limit them in some way. So people are complex, and we want to be curious why people think the way they do, instead of making assumptions about who they are. So I think about that a lot, being generous with each other, and with ourselves too. Seeing the complexity of our conditioning, and that, again, our value, our artha, is in our spiritual life. is in our character, who we are. I stress that a lot. I mean, I've always liked those quotes that list the saintly qualities of a devotee, like the 26 qualities of a devotee. Or there's so many verses in the Gita, divine and demoniac natures. We read the demoniac nature, yeah, that's me. We have very dualistic, very mixed natures, but we want to focus on our potential to be this effulgent soul, to represent the tradition. And that's one of the fruits for me of facing death, is I really want to represent the tradition, represent Prabhupada, represent the Acharyas, understand Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, conclusions of the scripture. So that, to me, is progress. To really take it seriously, but to keep a sense of humor. If we can't laugh at ourselves, we're in trouble. Like I'll be hacking all day. I can make a recording for like a horror movie about the sounds that I make throughout the day. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Like, truth knows it. When I'm eating, because it's so hard to swallow, I'm like, I just was praying I wouldn't do that during the class, But it's part of the journey of healing. And one of the principles here is self-acceptance. That's where I'm at right now. I have to go through it. The way out is through. So it's very important, if we're going to accept anybody else, that we have acceptance for where we are in the equation. Not that we're complacent, but this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be, and in between is my sadhana and my prayer, my Vaishnava Seva, which is my humble attempt here, to serve you. So I can't do much, can't even write much these days, but at least I can try to speak something according to my understanding. And I'm about ready for questions, if you have one.
In the books that Prabhupada gave us, say for example, Nectar of Instruction, there's a lot of categorization, stratifying. So if that kind of categorization is not to pigeonhole or stereotype, what's the purpose of all that? Because we don't want to be like that and just stereotype people. So why do we get so much analysis like that in our...
Well, I think it's important. It's like in the chapter on the modes of nature. There's different qualities according to the modes of nature. And to understand, there are, pigeonhole if you like, there are qualities listed, do's and don'ts, good habits, bad habits. But from my perspective, it would be, we're so much more than that. We may be acting like that, but is that the whole story? Do we believe people are sincere? Or are they just damaged goods? I remember being out in Harinam and we had a mixed group, and some of the temple devotees going, oh, he's a bum, he's an alcoholic. And then the outside devotees going, don't be judgmental, So, you embrace the tiger, or you respect it, he's a soul, but you may not be able to hang out with him. So we have to be able to see, who should I hang out with? And it isn't just anybody, even a devotee, but I've kind of analyzed it that I want to be with people, it's svadigya, I forget what it is, forget what the word is, like-minded person. You want to be with like-minded, similar consciousness. And probably for me, the most important quality, besides having a spiritual bend of mind, is that people are honest. They're not pretentious. What you see is what you get. Then I can be comfortable Because it's easy, maybe easier for someone like me. I mean, it's just natural. People say, you're so brave and courageous. I think, I'm just being who I am. That's all. Maybe for you. So, at least that's how I see it. I want to think everyone is above me. No one is below me. I offer you respect. I may have to do it from a distance. I may not be able to like hang out with you. But if you get enough distance, you can be respectful to everyone. But to believe, I mean, look at Prabhupada in dealing with us. He saw the good. He saw the potentiality. He could have said, you're just hippies, you know. I don't know exactly how he saw us in some ways, but we know he was very encouraging to an extreme. He encouraged us to stay the course. Even when we fell down from our position repeatedly, he would keep encouraging us to get up because he saw our potential as a soul, and he had absolute faith in the holy name and in the process of bhakti. So we need to make distinctions, but I don't feel that they should be so hard that we close our heart to somebody. My wife used to work in inner city Baltimore, and she would go to get her lunch sometimes, and she'd get accosted by these beggars, and sometimes they were rather aggressive, and she had to like hold on to her purse. And I said, that's fine, protect yourself, but don't close your heart to them. Pray for them. You're looking at the modes of nature here. So this is ignorance, this is passion, this is goodness, this is a aspiring devotee. You know, this is a kanishta, this is a madhyam, this is an uttam. And we have to deal with people in different ways. But to keep our heart open, to know that people are so much more than that designation, and they have so much potential to rise above their conditioning. So I don't know if that's...
No, it's great. It's like these analyses are like guidelines for association, which is,
Yes.
as Prabhupada would say, it's 90% of Krishna consciousness,
Yes.
knowing how to associate. Thank you.
Yes, Prabhu.
There are those devotees who would argue from their own experience that the process of sadhana, service, taking shelter of the holy name, introspection, having close relationships with other devotees, which one can reveal one's mind and acquire comprehension, etc. That process itself is sufficient and powerful enough to bypass the need for, say, traditional counseling or contemporary counseling and talk therapy.
Right? Well, I don't say it's for everyone. But the way that I see counseling is assisted introspection, especially with a devotee therapist. Now, I'm biased. My wife's a therapist. I work with her. I was in therapy. It helped me. But I don't say everyone must do this. It must be, you know, the sixth regular principle or whatever. But this list, you don't have to have counseling to do it, but it is kind of self-help in a way. And I find a lot of these ideas devotees don't practice. They don't do introspection. They don't look at their issues. And everybody suffers, in my opinion, because of it. So, you know, I mean, you could say that's just your relative opinion. Well, it's true. But it's based on a lot of experience. And a lot of what my wife does is straight preaching. But people empower you when you have the title, the degree. They give you power. So it's a big responsibility. You know, we'll be at a gathering and She'll be talking to someone, and they find out she's a therapist, and they go, "Can I talk to you?" I mean, you know, we want someone to hear our stuff, our story, our challenges, and sometimes we're afraid to talk to devotees about it because we don't think they're going to be confidential. So we could have lay therapists who are devotees in the temple or something, people to talk to, people that you can share your struggles with, so that the devotees stay devotees.
Well, part of what I was saying is predicated on Vaishnava relationships.
Yes.
Strong Vaishnava relationships and close Vaishnava.
Right, and that's not always so easy. Sometimes we don't, well, times have changed, but when I was a young devotee, we didn't know anything about anybody, because it was mine to talk about yourself. Where you're from even. I didn't, you know, just service, Prabhu. So that was an extreme. I mean, it served us in some ways. So yeah, I admit I have a bias, but I share what works for me, and I say, take what works for you and leave the rest. But to me, if you go down the list here, these are all Krishna conscious habits: gratitude, making peace with your past, forgiveness, giving love, showing up for your life, community. It's just a certain, because it is something that I think about in every talk. For that, you know what you're saying, people will question. Well, you know, we got everything we need, and you're but this is not. I don't think this is anything that Prabhupada's not teaching. He may not specifically lay it out like I'm laying it out, but I mean that's my contribution. From my perspective, we all have gifts. We all have a contribution. So for me, this is what I have to give because it what's helped me grow. Facing death for 5 years, especially the last 2 years. So I'm not afraid to share it. I'm not afraid to face the music that somebody may object. You know, it's like we all have to do that. We have strong opinions. And hopefully I present them in a way that's not off-putting, it's not arrogant, it's not like, this is the absolute truth, surrender, Prabhu. They're like suggestions, and I'm trying to unpack them and make them understandable and practicable and useful for devotees. There may be one thing in here that can change your life. I mean, I hate to say it, it sounds so dramatic because you hear it so much in personal growth. This can change your life. Well, it's true, but you know. So, I mean, these really, given this talk, facing death is life transforming for me. So I'm still brought to my knees, which means it's like, don't know how I'm going to get through the day. It happened a lot in Vrindavan. I'd just be crying uncontrollably, wondering how I was going to get through it. And it was forced voluntary austerity. And I did it in Vrindavan, and I got a lot of mercy from it. And and so I'm here speaking these recommendations that I have from my experience. So you can't argue with that in one sense. Well, that's your experience. Yes, Mike. Time is on my side. Hare Krishna.
Not now, but, wonderful class, thank you. We have to keep with our schedule.
Yeah. I was just finishing up.
If I can indulge the devotees a couple more minutes, we want to read our book scores for the month of September.